The right of private defense is an important principle in criminal law. It recognizes that people have a natural right to protect themselves, others, and their property from unlawful attacks. So in Malaysia, this right is provided under Section 96 to 106 of the Penal Code. This provision protect a person from criminal liability as long as the act of defense stays within the limits set by law. However, the issue becomes more complicated when an act of private defense results in death, in cases involving murder or culpable homicides. The court must decide whether the accused acted lawfully in self-defense or went beyond what was necessary. So Malaysian courts tend to take a strict approach, especially where excessive force or lack of proportionality is involved. As a result, many claims of private defense in homicide cases are rejected. So this study examines the legal rules on private defense in Malaysia and how they apply to murder and culpable homicide cases. By analysing case, law and statistical data, it explores the difficulties faced by accused person in relying on private defense and consider whether the current legal approach properly balance the right to self-protection with the value of human life. Move on to the objectives of the study as follows. The first one is to study the doctrine of private defense under the Penal Code, and the second one to analyse the application of private defense in cases of murder and culpable homicide in Malaysia through numerical and statistical analysis. And the third one is to evaluate judicial trends and limitations in the successful invocation of private defense. And the last but not least, to propose recommendation aimed at improving clarity and fairness in the application of the doctrine. As I was mentioned earlier, the right of private defense under the Penal Code is recognized and regulated by Section 96 to 106, which provided that acts done in the lawful exercise of its right are not criminal offences, so long as they remain within the limits prescribed by law. So Section 96 establishes that the foundation of the doctrine by stating that nothing is an offence when done in the exercise of private defence, while Section 97 expands its scope by allowing a person to defend his own body as well as the body of any other person against offences affecting the human body, thereby recognising both self-defence and the defence of others. So, however, this right is not absolute, as Section 99 imposes important restrictions, including situations where there is sufficient time to seek assistance from public authorities, or where the act is done by a public servant acting lawfully and in a good faith, and further requires that the force used must be necessary and not excessive. So, it must ensure that private defense is exercised only when genuinely required and not as a justification for unnecessary violence. As you can see here, based on the diagram above, the classification of homicide follows the genus and species doctrine. Of the case analyzed, 73.9% were charged with murder, and while 26.1% involved culpable homicide, not amounting to murder. So this distinction mainly reflects the degree of probability that the victim's death will result from the accused's actions. So the diagram also highlights the prosecution's preference for charging under Section 300 murder rather than Section 299. So this difference relates to the mens rea or mental state. Murder involves an act committed with the intention to cause death or to cause bodily injury, sufficiently in the ordinary course of nature to cause of death, whereas culpable homicide not amounting to murder applies where death is merely likely to occur, and the high proportion of murder charges indicates that in most cases where private defense is pleaded, the accused's initial action was sufficiently violent or dangerous for the prosecution to consider the highest level of criminal intent present.
Diagram 2 illustrates the success rate of the plea of private defense and provides key insights into the judiciary's approach toward this justification. The data is divided into two principal outcomes, which are successful and unsuccessful pleas. A dominant proportion of cases, which are 84.1%, resulted in the failure of the plea of private defense. This overwhelming figure demonstrates that, in most cases, the accused failed to satisfy the legal requirements necessary for the defense to succeed. Common reasons for rejection include findings that the accused was the initial aggressor, that there was no reasonable apprehension of death or grievous hurt, or that the force used exceeded what was necessary in the circumstances. For example, where an accused continues to inflict harm after the threat was already been neutralized. The right of private defense is deemed to have ceased, causing the plea to fail. This substantial failure rate reflects the court's strict application of Section 99, Clause 4, which limits the right of private defense by prohibiting the infliction of excessive harm. Conversely, the remaining 15.9% of cases represent instances where the plea of private defense was successfully established. In these cases, the defense managed to prove on a balance of probabilities that the accused acted out of a genuine necessity to protect their person or property. A successful plea typically leads to an acquittal, as the act is no longer classified as an offense. This relatively low success rate underscores the demanding evidentiary threshold imposed by the courts. Success generally depends on demonstrating the presence of an immediate and imminent threat, the absence of a reasonable opportunity to retreat or obtain assistance from public authorities, and a response that was proportionate to the initial attack. In summary, although the statistical success rate of the plea of private defense is low, it remains an essential element of the justice system. It functions as a crucial safeguard for individuals confronted with life-threatening situations where state protection is unavailable. Nevertheless, the high failure rate of 84.1% serves as a clear reminder that the plea of private defense is not a license to kill and is subjected to rigorous judicial scrutiny to prevent its abuse in situations involving retaliation or unnecessary violence.
Hi everyone, I'm Gayatri Saravanan and I will be explaining about the punishment outcomes in cases where the plea of private defense was raised but unsuccessful. Based on the study, 58% of the cases resulted in death sentence, 26.1% resulted in imprisonment, and only 15.9% ended in acquittal. This shows that in most cases, the plea of private defense fails. The high number of death sentence is mainly because of the courts found that the legal condition for private defense were not fulfilled. The usual happens when the accused was the initial aggressor or continued to use force after the threat had already ended, which is not allowed under Section 99 of the Penal Code. Cases that result in imprisonment involve exception 2 to Section 300, where the accused acted in good faith but used more force than necessary. As a result, the offences is reduced and the punishment under Section 304. The small number of acquittal shows that the courts apply a strict standard when accepting private defense claims in order to balance the right to self-protection with the protection of human life. Thank you.
Now we are moving to the analysis of private defense and culpable homicide based on cases we collected. Let's begin with the right of private defense. According to our finding, a staggering 84.1% of the pleas fail, while 15.9% succeed. Why is the rate so low? Section 69 is the foundation. It grants the right to protect oneself, but it's not a blank check. The act must be necessary and proportionate. Section 100 is even stricter. To justify causing death in self-defense, the accused must prove a reasonable apprehension of extreme threats, such as death, rape, or kidnapping. The data suggests that most fair cases involve excessive force. If you bring knife to a fist fight, the court will likely reject the plea. The 84% failure rate proves that Malaysian courts are vigilant against private defense being used as a cover for retaliation. Next, we look at the cases where the accused had a right to private defense but exceeded it. This falls under exception 2 of the Section 300. The data shows that 58% of these cases still lead to murder conviction under Section 302. Exception 2, is the partial defense. If successful, it reduces charge from murder to culpable homicide. However, the court requires good faith. If the prosecution proves the excess was intentional and judged by the number of injuries or the type of weapon they used, the court will deny the exception. This high conviction rate indicates that the shield of exception 2 is very difficult to hold up if there is any hint of premeditation. Finally, looking at the diagram form, we see that the section 300 and 302 remain the most frequently applied provisions, accounting for 58% of homicide cases and lies. These highlight two things, which is, first, Section 300 provides the rigorous definition of murder, which focusing on intention and imminently dangerous act. Second, Section 302 provides that the teeth of the law, the sentencing. The prevalence of this section underscore the prosecution commitment to addressing the most heinous crime with the maximum severity of the law. To conclude, our analysis shows that while the Penal Code offers avenues for defense, the Malaysian judiciary is incredibly cautious. The high failure rates for private defense pleas and the frequent conviction under Section 302 serve as deterrent. It sends a clear message which the law protects the right to live, and any use of force, even in self-defense, will be placed under a judicial microscope to prevent abuse. Thank you.
Now for our last analysis on the limitations in applying private defense in Malaysian criminal cases. As we could see in the diagram above, for about 84.1% of cases from our analysis where it exceeds the right of private defense, and the remaining 15.9% of cases where it did not exceed the right of private defense, alias succeed to establish the elements of defense and freed from the charge of murder. There are various factors leading to the failure in applying private defense in these cases, which includes the proportionality of the harm, where they inflicted more harm than necessary. Second, where their action exceeded after the danger had diminished. And third, voluntarily entered into the confrontation or argument. Fourth, inconsistent with the legitimate exercise of the right to private defense. And fifth, grave and sudden provocation following with the act of retaliation, burden of proof, inconsistent with the genuine act of self-defense, and last but not least, the failure to establish any elements of private defense. Meanwhile, our analysis also shows several factors on the accomplishment of applying private defense in these cases. Firstly, where they did not exceed the right of private defense. Second, legitimate right to defend the family and property. Third, balance of probabilities. And last but not least, where the prosecution failed in establishing prima facie against the accused. In conclusion, the right of private defense occupies a vital position within Malaysian criminal law as a mechanism that enables individuals to protect themselves and others in situations of imminent danger. However, where the exercise of this right results in death, particularly in cases involving murder and culpable homicides, its applications becomes necessarily restrictive. An analysis of the statutory provisions and judicial decisions demonstrates that Malaysian courts adopt a strict and cautious approach when assessing pleas of private defense. The consistently low success rate reflects the judiciary firm's emphasis on proportionality, necessity, and good faith to ensure that the doctrine is not misused to justify excessive or retaliatory violence. While this restrictive approach serves to uphold the sanctity of human life, it also presents significant challenges for accused persons who act under genuine and extreme threat. The continued refinement of judicial guidelines and statutory clarity may assist in striking a more balanced approach between individual self-protection and the broader public interest. In essence, private defense remains a legally recognized but narrowly confined doctrine. Operating as an exception rather than the rule in homicide cases, its careful and principled application ensure that justice is achieved without undermining the fundamental value placed on human life within the Malaysian criminal justice system.